Today we're going to be harvesting again from my rolling herb planter. This is one of my favorite simple things that almost anybody could create in their own space, and I'm going to show you how many herbs you can grow in a very small little planter and harvest with you today. Sound good? It's going to be delicious. What are you talking about? Welcome to the Gardenary channel. Gardening plus ordinary equals gardenary. We're trying to make gardening an ordinary part of everyday life once again. So if you're a beginner gardener, you're in the right place. And if you're an experienced gardener who wants to start your own garden coach business, you're in the right place too. So subscribe to Gardenary and hang out with us. We're going to be growing all season long. Now I've been harvesting from this rolling planter all summer, and my goal is to get enough harvest out of this planter to stretch me pretty far into the winter in terms of herbs from my own garden. So I don't know if you've ever read this. So Square Foot Gardening was written by this guy named Mel Bartholomew, and he also wrote another book called High Value Veggies or High Yield Veggies. And he did this study to see which things from the garden are worth the most, have the most return on investment. And can you guess which came up in the top 15? They were all herbs. In fact, there were so many herbs that came up as the most valuable thing to grow that he just grouped them all together. He was like, whatevs, this is gonna be like 15 things that are all basically the same thing. So herbs are a super valuable thing to add to your kitchen garden, and you can really just have an herb garden like I have right here. So I put this rolling planter together last summer. I actually have an entire online course called the Herb Garden Guide, and I put this planter together as part of that guide to show you how you can set up a super easy way to grow herbs that rolls around. You can put it in the sun, out of the sun, however you want to do it. Now I just harvested the basil. That was off of just 2 plants. And now I'm going to harvest the cutting celery. So this is actually honestly not really an herb. It's not an herb at all, but it is in a plant family that also is in herbs, which is parsley and cilantro. So I added the celery in here this year because I don't know, I just thought it'd be really pretty, and I use it in a way almost like I use herbs. So as flavoring to soups and stews, and then also for juices. I love making celery juice with this cutting celery. So all I'm doing to cut this celery is cutting down on the exterior part of the plant, and boom, look at all that celery. Now this is different than grocery store celery. You're gonna have a lot more, lot thinner stem. It's not thick, and heavy like the grocery store celery, but it tastes very similar, if not so much better. It's gonna be a lot fresher, and it's so good for you and pretty prolific. So you can harvest from these just the way you would harvest from herbs again and again. All right, so far we've done a celery harvest and a basil harvest. What's next? Let's see. I think the next thing I want to harvest is rosemary. So my rosemary has been a little slow growing, I'll be honest. Rosemary was one of the easiest things I grew when I lived in Houston. But here in the Chicago area, I haven't been able to get quite as much production as I wanted. I'm going to cut off 2 of these stems with the hopes that it will become a little bit less woody, and maybe it'll branch off and give me some bigger growth. So I'm going to cut these 2 and leave this main one. And then I have this smaller rosemary here, so I'm going to cut from that as well. What I love doing with rosemary is drying it. I do love using it fresh as well, but dried rosemary, oh my gosh, on winter potatoes, it's just like the best thing. So there's some rosemary. Oh my gosh, can you smell it? It smells so good. Here's some more rosemary here in the back. I generally like to put rosemary on the edges of my garden because it does tend to have kind of a draping nature. So I'm cutting away like this. So got this rosemary, and then I think I do have a few more rosemaries. I'll take a few extra little snips. You want to harvest this kind of like the way you harvest your basil, right above the leaf nodes, so you'll get more growth. All right, next step is sage. Sage is pretty easy to grow in the garden, and it actually will last through changes in the weather. This is garden sage, this one, and it's given me tons of these little leaves, which I don't love. I actually want these nice big leaves. So I'm gonna cut it back here and see if I can encourage those little leaves to become big leaves to grow up and mature for me. But I can at least cut up a few little samples like this. Aren't they so pretty? I love the gray green of sage leaves. I think it's perfect in like a, what do you call that? Like a bouquet or something. Like those muted tones are so popular right now, and sage definitely gives you that. All right, is this looking phenomenal in this basket right now? I think so. All right, my chives are out of control, OOC. That's what I like to say about a lot of my garden. So this one's in the shade, so let me do this one right here for you. As you can see, it looks like somebody's hair didn't get fixed. One of my kids' hair didn't get fixed for about 3 weeks. So I am literally just gonna come back here and just chop, chop, chop. That's all I'm gonna do. And try to pull this back so that we get healthier greens, because this is getting a little too straggly for my preference. What do you think? So I can save these. I can freeze them and use them. What I like to do is chop them up, stick them in a freezer bag, and then I can have them all winter long. So there's some chives. I can really do that across the whole front of the bed because there's so much of them. I'm gonna not make you suffer through that again. So here is parsley. Let me show you what's happening here. The parsley is actually going to seed. See all the little flowers? This is very good evidence why it's in the umbellifer family, because don't these look like little umbrellas? I totally think they do. So most of this is honestly beyond flavorful. So if you see these leaves start to spread out like that, that's what happens when it's going to flower. And when that happens, the flavor is just not awesome. So I have a couple options here. I can cut this back and hope that I'm gonna get some newer parsley, or I can let it go to seed. I am just gonna play around here and I'm just gonna cut it back just for the sake of this video. So I'm gonna cut back all of the flowering stalks and see if I perhaps could get a little bit more parsley out of this plant. The reason I'm doing this is because parsley is a biennial. So in great conditions, parsley could actually last through a whole year. So I'm confident that there is potential for my parsley, and actually I can see this now that I've cut back this flowering piece. I can actually see some better looking parsley leaves. So that's the kind we want to be harvesting versus these big spread out kind. So I'm gonna, I can either dry this and put it in like a little, I don't know, arrangement or something, or I can compost it, and then I'm gonna hope for some better parsley harvest before the season is up. Where I live in the Chicago area, I'm not gonna be able to last. This isn't gonna last for a year because we'll get such a hard frost and snow, but I could at least get it to last into the fall. That is my hope. All right, so we've done sage and rosemary. Here's my cilantro, doing very similar thing to the parsley. You can tell it's in a similar plant family. So it's producing seed, and we're gonna let this go ahead and finish up drying before I touch it. So I'm just gonna move this out of my way. And I do have some mint. Now I broke the rules here. You're generally not supposed to plant mint with anything else. But I had this little mint plant and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna do it because I want to. I may regret it later. I'll probably pull this out at the end of the season. I love mint, and that is one of my goals for this year actually, is to grow enough mint to have mint tea all winter long. And I'm pretty good on my way there. We'll do a video on mint harvest actually later for you guys. All right, I'm almost done. This is a different kind of sage right here. This is called Culinary Sage, and it's a much thinner leaf. I think it's called Culinary Sage because it's more like for everyday cooking. So you can see how differently shaped the leaves are. Still delicious, still very similar flavor, but I think it's broken up a little bit differently in your palate because of the shape of the leaves. All right, anything else for me to harvest? Let me see. I do have more chives, of course, more basil, and I do have some thyme here. So I'm gonna see if I can get to it. My chives are so unruly. They're like one of my kids, that they're just kind of taken over. So you can see the thyme is suffering a little bit. So I'm gonna cut just a tiny bit of it and see if I can preserve that. And then I've got thyme over here as well. So I'm gonna cut this one too. Keeping an eye on my dogs here. They're out here today with me. So I'm watching Totoro's over there, looking at the neighbors. All right, so isn't that cute? Thyme's just so, it's like little pixie leaves or something. So not a huge thyme harvest, but at least something that I can bring in and dry and preserve. I do love thyme flavor in winter dishes. So I would love to get to preserve a bunch of it for the winter that's coming, unfortunately. All right, friends, I think we've about filled up my basket. Not totally quite, but let's check it out. So lots of basil, lots of celery, lots of sage. We got some parsley and flowers, mint, thyme, chives, and my favorite, rosemary. So yummy. So this is what you can expect to harvest from your herb garden. I like to say you could do this once a week during the growing season. So this is a pretty small little rolling planter. I think this is 2 by 6. So a 2 by 6 rolling planter. You can get this many herbs every single week from the container. If that's not impressive, I don't know what is. Like I told you, Mel Bartholomew says that herbs are one of the best, most valuable things to grow in your kitchen garden. And when you can get this many from this small space, I think you should go for it. If you want to learn how to grow herbs yourself and you haven't had the most success yet, or you just want to make sure you do it right in the first place, you can check out our herb garden guide. I have a little video that walks you through my secret to herb growing success like this one, and you'll get an opportunity to learn more about the herb garden guide online course. You can check it out right below this video. Thanks so much for watching and for bringing back the kitchen garden, especially the herb garden with me. I'll see you next time.